Welcome, guys, to the HSE Edge. Today I am with Dan and Ariana. So, welcome, guys, to our podcast. Thanks for making the time and being with us. So, Dan and Ariana, if you can introduce yourselves and tell us about your how you started the EHS profession and like a little bit of your background.
Do you want to go first, Ariana? Or
Sure.
yeah, so Arianna Howard. I'm based out of Denver, Colorado. I grew up in EHS. I did an HSE internship in college. Didn't even really know what the acronyms meant, but it paid like 18 bucks an hour. So here we are. It was a lot of boots on ground, manufacturing type work. And then I moved states and got into more in the traditional EHS consulting world, kind of jack of all trades, due diligence, auditing, air permitting, safety still. And through that's where kind of found the IT side of EHS. And now I do that work specifically. One foot in, still in industry, and then as a consultant for my own firm.
Awesome. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Iskender, for having us. Really excited to talk about anything related to like tech and EHS. But my journey in EHS kind of started about 10 years ago. I was the person with the clipboard and the checklist. I started as an OSHA inspector,
Oh,
actually,
right.
uh, and just, kind of making sure everyone was following the rules.
Yeah.
But kind of what fascinated me or piqued my interest was more of how safety culture could be transformed from engaging with people rather than just focusing on compliance. And so, you know, I I kind of transitioned out of more regulation or the regulatory side into local government work and then in private industry where I am now. But I've kind of seen a lot of different industries over my career so far. And then with that, I kind of saw a lot of EHS professionals sort of drowning in paperwork
Yeah.
and spending more time really documenting things and actually trying to improve it. And so that's where I kind of started exploring AI and really uh, seeing how that could really improve the time that or increase the time spent engaging with people and reducing that time with documentation, which I think is probably what we'd rather be doing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
probably the most important work that we do as EHS professionals. But thanks again for having us.
Sure. I mean, yeah, like I think like Dan's and Ariana backgrounds like complementary. Like you guys look at two different. I mean, Ariana's like more into like EHS management systems, which is I think the bedrock of like having good data to feed it to the AI, and
Mhm.
like Dan is like trying to explore how we could use AI usefully in EHS, which is I think complement each other beautifully. So Ariana, like you said, yeah. Like you specialize right now like in IT management for like EHS. So
Mhm.
what's sparked your interest in like using technology solutions to improve EHS processes?
Yeah, I think what first sparked my interest was kind of a similar path Dan took when I was doing consulting work. I'd go audit, it was just endless spreadsheets, disconnected reports. I'd have to garner a lot of information from these acquired companies, and it was just a bed of mess.
Yeah.
And which ultimately ended up being, one, it's hard to uncover issues when you're looking at things like that. And it takes a lot of time, right? Consultants get paid hourly for the most part. And so looking back, I'm like, man, these clients were paying a lot of money just to make us go through heaps and
Yeah.
heaps of, if you've ever done an acquisition, there's usually like a shared file storage and it's just years and years of folders. And so selfishly, when I would go audit, I'd go audit 100+ upstream sites in the middle of nowhere and negative 15-degree weather. And they're like, here's your checklist. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? Fill it out every site and come back. And they're like, yeah. And so very early on in my career, I discovered just like basic checklist apps, right? That could compile
Uh-huh.
the data, you come back and you see, what the trends were. And that was more of a selfish game, but it really helped kind of streamline reporting afterwards and really just improved, the overall process. And then I kind of discovered the whole ecosystem of EHS technology, that there's software that do these things specifically. And I figured I could speak the language of EHS. This might be a good way for me to transition into that. So I moved to a firm that only did that, and that's really where my career kind of kicked off. And over the last couple of years, I've done it on the industry side, which also is a totally different viewpoint.
Yeah,
And the red tape and the bureaucracy and the real challenges as a consultant, you can kind of walk in, do your job, and walk out. But
yeah,
when you have some responsibility and some stake in the game of being that EHS manager or leader within an organization, the stakes are a lot much higher from a compliance perspective and things like that. So I consider myself the liaison. I can talk EHS, I can talk IET, and that's really where I thrive and the work that I enjoy.
that's a like that's good to like see like people with this kind of background because usually EHS people are not like your IT like people, so
Right.
they're more like free like used to Excel spreadsheets, etc. So
Yeah.
yeah, transitioning to like full-on IT systems is like kind of difficult. So
Right.
like someone in the middle is always good. Uh, but yeah, then like you've think like you shared like you started like playing around with a lot of AI systems. So what led you to I don't know switch to the AI? I mean these AI systems instead of the traditional methods.
Yeah, I think it was actually frustration that led me here. It's just like I mentioned earlier with the the a ton of time spent on just documentation and all the administrative kind of processes. I spent probably weeks trying to develop SOPs, uh, spending day doing a JHA.
Yeah,
But I realized, again, like that was taking too much time away from, the most important work that we do, and that's really engaging with people and assessing, any hazards that they're exposed to. So I think like a turning point was I started using, ChatGPT or Claude
mhm,
for creating an SOP. Just in 2022 when ChatGPT came out, I was just kind of a little curious, like, can this do this
yeah,
faster? And it, you know, like for the SOP example, previous week to do that, but with these generative AI applications, I can do it in a matter of minutes, at least the first draft,
yeah, yeah,
and then a JHA, 30 minutes from start to finish compared to like 4 hours. So, that really just kind of made me realize that these tools could really help uh, keep us doing the most impactful work and really kind of offloading that maybe more administrative, maybe not so impactful work to like this. I call it kind of like an eager safety intern that knows every single OSHA regulation and every best industry practice, but has never really stepped foot on a work site. So,
yeah,
but they ChatGPT, Claude, these other generative AI applications do a really good job of uh, you know seeing where kind of generating the different forms that we need, giving us like a first draft, getting us maybe like 80% of the way there, and we're
yeah,
able to um, you know when we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, but we provide our guidance and our evaluation, their output, and then that frees up time for us to do more impactful work.
yeah. I think like with these systems, like you free up a lot of time, so you can focus on the things that bring in like more value, and also like gives you more time to think about like other ways, like you didn't like. think about before. And even like try new approaches like you maybe not an expert in, but like the AI could coach you to like get us at least start and try them. So it's something that I've experienced myself and gave me so much like capabilities that I didn't have before. So yeah, like we often hear like a lot of EHS professionals, like some of them are like can't even spell AI. So in your experience, how aware are EHS teams about the full potential of AI?
Yeah,
Well,
I think I've heard that joke more lately than I care to admit, and I think there's some half truth to it, right? It's coming from a lot of senior leaders, which it's in their face, they can't avoid it, but they don't really know, we're kind of jumping from square zero to square 10 in some
yeah,
aspects. And I also think that it's like this big monster in the closet that that no one really wants to open and peek in and see because it
uh,
immediately becomes overwhelming because of that lack of technical knowledge. EHS is typically slower when it comes to technology. There's always going to be fast-paced companies that are, on the forefront. But we are not the fastest industry when it comes to adopting new things. There's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of reliance, and wondering how it can fit in with regulations, which are also constantly changing. So EHS tends to like to see what works first, and then dive,
take,
dip their
yeah,
toe in the water,
uh,
later. I would say like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, they weren't even thinking about AI.
yeah,
It seemed like a far off technical concept, but the awareness is growing. People are excited about it. They know it's out there. They want to use it. They just don't know where to start. Um,
yeah, yeah,
there's a gap between kind of like understanding the basic concepts and then like applying it in a meaningful way, which is where I think people like Dan thrive and are gonna, people are gonna want to know like, what have you tried? What have you done? What's worked for you before they invest time and money into it. And they're stuck, in general, we're just generally stuck in reactive, compliance driven processes,
uh,
right? What do we have to do? So let's do it. What happened? So let's fix it. There's also a parallel conversation on like getting leaders to move away from like traditional safety rates like TRI and DART. That is like a very hard like nut to crack because that's what's been embedded in them for the last 20 years. So to
yeah,
try to change that mindset is hard. And so AI really will enable us to like be more proactive.
mm,
But that is a huge mindset shift. And that's where like education and I think those practical use cases are going to be really critical.
yeah,
So we
yeah.
can show them like this is how AI can actually make your jobs easier rather than more complicated. Because I think right now it's how much is it going to cost and how much time do I have to invest in it and why can't my current tool just do that? Or why can't the data guy in IT like make it add a trend
Or
line, you
yeah,
know? So I think understanding what those real use cases are is going to be key over the next, year or so.
yeah. Dan, you mentioned like there is a gap between like the AI hype and AI reality in the AHS world. So, where do you see the gap most clearly, and how can we bridge it?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of this is sort of echoing again what Ariana is saying too. I think there are three kind of misconceptions creating the gap right now, in my mind. The first one is kind of like this all or nothing fallacy, where a lot of EHS leaders maybe just believe that they need to go all in on this
Uh,
to really like get a strategic advantage or competitive advantage, or just some people are just, I don't want really anything to do with it right now. This is just hype. It's not going to help me at all.
yeah,
I don't trust it. The next is like this black box misconception where, in I think it's legitimate in the sense that, these systems like generative AI and these other AI systems are very complex, but
mm,
I think the conception and misconception is that they're too complex to understand. But I think there are some, examples where you can start with really simple processes
yeah,
uh, and really see how it can create value for you.
Mhm.
And the final one is, and probably the most widely talked about, is just the job replacement fear.
Yeah, I was gonna
Like,
ask about that, but
is AI going to eliminate all safety jobs? Well, I would say no. Like
mm,
we have to be on site, like
mm,
interacting with people and processes and equipment.
mm,
It's it's in my mind very far off where AI is going to really be something that completely replaces all these jobs. I think it's more of like really uh, a tool that's going to enhance our job. But I think what I would echo again, like what Ariana was saying, is really I think there's just some need, well, a huge need for practical education on
mm,
this. Like the most common thing I hear is, this sounds interesting, but where do I start? Kind of like what Ariana said too. So I think if people kind of just start with, you know, the, some real basic education on how to use these systems, identify some specific pain points actually too. I
mm.
think, like try to do a JHA with one of these generative AI applications and experiment and see how it can benefit you or save you time. And so I think it's really start small, demonstrate the value, and then you can kind of get more expand from there or get go to more complicated things from there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, and also like because I think the progress of AI tools is like right now is like happening at this like a very like fast pace. Like every week there are new models, new like even like within the models themselves, like right now, like there are like large language models. Like last week, I read a paper about diffusion language model, which is another technique, which is supposed to be, I think it's 10 times faster than LLMs. So, like the space is changing so fast. So, yeah, I wouldn't blame like the EHS professionals for not like being like, on top of like the new like AI news and like grasping all this. But yeah, it's like even the people like within the AI and like sphere, like they're trying to like keep up with it. So it's a lot of changes,
Uh,
but it's
On
very
that
exciting.
point, yeah, on that point too, I think I would probably share the same opinion as Cam Stevens, who I think, at least Ariana I have talked with before, but he kind of mentioned with all this hype and, changes every day in AI, it's really important to just identify the trends
Yeah.
because those are the things that we really need to focus on and not just the shiny new tool that just
Mhm.
came out today. I think you kind of need to understand like the high level trends and applications of AI first, and then just start using them for pain points that you have,
Yeah,
and
pretty
just
much.
experiment.
And
Yeah,
start like with small things, and then like scale as you go. So like so it doesn't become overwhelming.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's the right approach. Uh, so yeah, Ariana, like, how can AI like power tools like reduce administrative burden on EHS teams and help them make faster, more informed decisions?
Yeah, I think, the most realistic, like most practical kind of first steps, especially for new exposure is, managing, shifting that responsibility from managing paperwork to like actively improving safety and compliance. Dan mentioned it a few times, but a huge chunk of people's time is spent sorting through reports, doing audits and inspections just to try to get to a trend. Like we're checking boxes to hopefully get some surface insight of where we should shift our focus. But I would say it's probably, if you ask any EHS site person, like it's probably 90-10, right? It's
Mm,
90-10 of them doing what they have to do versus what they would rather be doing.
mm,
And AI can essentially, do that, right? The predictive analytics can like flag high risk areas before those incidents happen, right? It's another stream of data that can help you surface those insights. And there can be an exercise done like, okay, is what our humans that are reporting, is that
Yeah.
aligning with what AI is catching? And that's where things like computer vision and stuff comes in. From a more technical perspective, it has to be trained correctly,
Yeah.
but that's a separate conversation. I also think me and Dan talked about this about a month ago, but like the agentic AI piece could really make a huge difference.
Mhm.
It can go that step further, right? Other than
Yeah.
like prompting and getting some kind of output, like it can actually take multi steps,
Yeah.
to identify those risks, trigger corrective action, assign it out, and follow up on it. You need to be careful because you want to make sure you're not losing the human piece of it, but you could start with something small like the small hazard concern reports, right? If you have a history of tracking those and corrective action is actually being applied to them, that's great data to train that model on, so that it can be used. You don't necessarily need it to do your full root cause
Yeah.
investigation, but create starting small and developing that trust in it is, I
Mhm.
think, can help. And then you start, every couple months, every year, as you layer on more maturity, you're starting to decrease that percentage, right? You're getting to the 70/30, you're getting to 60/40. I don't think we'll ever be at 100%, and I don't think for our profession we should be. But imagine even reducing half of the administrative burden that EHS professionals deal with today. I can
Mhm.
guarantee you, that would make a huge difference in work-life balance and how excited people are to actually do their jobs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I bet.
it really has an impact on the day to day. I think that's where you can see the most. Leaders are gonna know what's my ROI, but you maybe it's having to hire less EHS people, and then those EHS people that are there not having to stretch themselves overly thin just to do the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Um,
Like makes a lot like people's life, I guess, more balanced and like easier, I guess. So yeah, like you stressed a good point, which is like AI can be as good as the data has been trained on. So what are your thoughts about like ensuring data quality, addressing potential bias, and dealing with privacy or ethical concerns?
Yeah, yeah, this is a fun one. AI
Dan,
is
if you
only as
want
good as
to.
it's only as good as the data it learns from, right? And
Yeah.
let's be honest, EHS data is not always perfect. If anyone tells you the data is perfect and they've been capturing everything and everyone's close things and it's all consistent, someone's not telling the truth, right? There's reporting gaps, there's inconsistent data entry
Mhm.
within the same company from site to site, country to country. There's entire probably categories of risk that we aren't even capturing, right? But so if it's trained on incomplete or skewed data, like it's just going to reflect the same outcomes. Have you ever tried to
Mhm.
prompt Chat GPT and not give it really any information? You're going to get something extremely generic
Yeah.
and not really useful back. And then you
Mhm.
grow frustrated and you're like, well, let me feed you more. And slowly but surely you start to refine what that is. But that the first step isn't turning on AI, right? It's and expecting like some magical wand to be waved. It's making sure that the data feed in it is representative of what's happening within the organization in the field. It can help flag those inconsistencies, but
Mhm.
it can't fix bad data on its own.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to make sure it applies across different work environments. If it's only been trained on manufacturing incidents, it may not be as reliable in like a warehouse, logistics,
Mhm.
R&D type of environment, right? The risks are going to be different. And some aspects are the same, but
Yeah.
and and uh, for certain companies, that's where most of their incidents are happening, right? And so when you're going to pilot that AI project, maybe don't take the incident data from the plant and pilot it at a PDC.
Yeah.
uh, those are like the considerations that it might be easier because it's a smaller footprint of buy-in and things like that, but the risks aren't the same. So, focus on what you have the most data on that you can trust, and just continually like, refine that. I think from a privacy perspective and just, Dan mentioned this, but just the data in general, there's always going to be that cybersecurity privacy concern. Especially when we start talking about things like computer vision and monitoring worker behavior. I think transparency is the best option. And just like we have an EHS policy for drug testing after an
Yep.
incident, there has to be a policy. There's probably a company one at this point. If not, I guarantee most companies will have one by the end of this year. And then that EHS one needs to like feed into that. So that people know what the AI is being used for, or and more importantly, why. If it starts to feel like surveillance as opposed to a tool,
Yeah.
there's gonna be pushback, right?
Yeah, of course.
And I've seen companies do great things like for blur faces, blur
Mhm.
entire bodies,
Yeah.
so that's not an issue. But I think just making sure the cybersecurity team and those data privacy teams are pulled in is going to be really important, no matter how small your project is, so that it's not shut down because of some issue like that. At the end of the day, it has to be transparent, has to be ethical, and it actually has to be helpful.
Yeah, of course.
Otherwise, it's just another tech solution, another PO that we're paying for that no one's going to use or isn't interested in. So,
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned great points about uh, blurring faces, etc. For example, our solution at Solentech, we are taking, for example, data privacy very, very
mm,
very strictly because we don't collect facial cues. We blur out faces and we change them even like with the digital avatar. So like you wouldn't even recognize the person anymore in the video.
yeah.
And we had that feedback because we talked to unions and workers like who gave us that feedback. So it's not like just a bunch of IT people just making like a solution. Like it has been like through a communication with the people on the ground, so we could come up with something that brings value, but also they see the value and they are comfortable with it. So I think
Right.
it's a really good point that you brought up. Yeah, Dan. So on the topic of video analytics, how do you see computer vision improving workplace safety beyond like traditional detection methods?
Um, I, I mean, I can give an opinion. I think maybe Ariana has even more information on it, but
Oh,
I think specifically like maybe the computer vision systems. I know it can at least help us get to more of a preventative type uh, stance where we are preventing the actual or predicting even the actual hazards and the injuries that can occur that the computer vision models are observing in the data they're collecting, which I find the most exciting because I think that's kind of the main purpose of our job is really preventing
yeah.
injuries, and that's kind of why I got into public health in general. But also curious to hear what Ariana has to say on that.
Yeah, I've been diving more into the tools out there, just from the industry side, when you have a stable kind of software, you kind of feel more open to what tools are out there.
Yeah.
No one wants to sit on demos or talk to vendors when your foundation is a mess.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a great time for companies that feel pretty comfortable in their current software. They're not trying to switch. They're not building something. That's really where they could start to talk to these CV vendors and see what they offer. I do think that it's a powerful tool, though, right? Most of them, if not all of them, leverage existing cameras that are already in facilities. You're not relying on human input. It's real-time monitoring, right? And if the tool is built correctly, it doesn't require much investment. At least from a time perspective. I worked on a project a few years ago. It was an AI company that was traditionally built for security signatures, right? So it had the models were trained and it could look for good security things, people not scanning badges, intruders in the parking lot, trying to open locked doors. And the security team at the time wanted more ROI, so they pulled in safety, which this was way before AI was on our
Yeah.
feeds every day. This is probably like 3 years ago. And they were like, we would love for you guys to get a piece of this and have some input. And so, but it didn't have I didn't have that yet. And so we
Yeah.
had to feed it we were like, it would be great if it could find forklift issues and
Yeah.
auto report them into the system.
Mhm.
And it seemed like a great idea at the time. And now I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I would have killed that project in a second because it required us to go request the footage from
Yeah.
security, which was funny, and then send the vendor the specific data files. And it took months, and we really didn't even get anything out of it. And so I think where the most successful vendors and where the success is going to come from a client perspective is like the ones that are investing in those pre-trained models rather than expecting clients to like build them with them.
Yeah.
EHS teams don't have time for that anymore, and they don't
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
expertise to train AI from scratch. There's lengthy setup times, the budgets, even if they're going to do it for free, right?
Yeah.
That's still time, administrative time you're taking away from being on the floor.
Mhm.
And so there is a lot of data out there. These vendors are going to have to find the one or those really good clients that want to invest and have the capabilities to do that. But for the most part, a lot of companies don't have that kind of flexibility or the time. And so, I think the best solutions are going to be, they offer flexibility for fine tuning, but they don't put the burden of the data collection and training back on the client.
Mhm.
And it can drive real safety improvements, and let's imagine you have a good foundation
Mhm.
and you have this extra tool. There's always going to be questions like, can it integrate, blah, blah. I don't even think that that's a good first step. I think pilot it out, start it, and then look at if they're a good tool, they're gonna go from capture to insights very, very quickly.
True.
You don't need to use it to assign out things. You don't need it to impede your current processes, but just look at those dashboards that are coming out of that, and are the same risk that are being caught by the cameras and the signatures in there the same risk that people are reporting? I think that's where a very realistic starting point when we talk about, computer vision and things it can do. And if a company's doing it right, it's going to focus on PIVs. It's going to focus on, PPE capturing, and maybe property damage. A lot of ergonomics is also a good one. So it's going to capture those high risk things that require a lot of human input and focus on that. So I'm excited about it. It's just more so seeing who's doing what, how are they pricing it out, and
Mhm.
how it could eventually integrate with the existing systems that teams do have.
Yeah, I think yeah, you brought up very good insights here. Like from my experience talking to like other like EHS leaders, yeah, you mentioned like yeah, they don't have time to like fine tune the model or even like play around with the data, which is correct. I mean, they
Yeah,
want something that starts good out of the box, like takes that burden and starts like slowly but surely giving them more value and more data coming through. And what I've seen like people use the like for example our system like use it to like for example flat see if they when they inputted like a new like safety program or something, see how what's the effect of it, like I don't know, reducing the number of alerts for example for PPE compliance or something like that.
right.
So like they've started seeing those and yeah, and I think like you could take a company from a like a reactive approach, like just reacting to the risk, to something that you could like see the trends and act on them before they even escalate.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And a good tool is gonna get down into the details, right? You'll see the risk and then you click on
yeah,
the risk and it's like, okay, where's the risk occurring the most? Okay, it's occurring in this corner of the plant. We constantly have pedestrians walking in
yeah, yeah,
forklift aisles. Okay, click that. What time of the day is it happening? Is it happening on night shift, day shift? Like that's a very real coaching tool that a operations leader could take literally the next day and do a coaching talk like, hey team, we're seeing a lot of this happening. And it doesn't require extra work, right? They're just opening the software, clicking a few buttons and getting some very real insights. And I think that that's where the value really is.
yeah, exactly. Then, so from an industrial hygiene and safety program perspective, like what are the keys to roll out AI in a way that supports frontline EHS professionals?
Yeah, I think a lot of my perspectives are kind of focused on using the generative AI application
Mhm.
specifically. But I kind of like this EASE, so EASE kind of implementation approach. So it's, evaluating like your first pain points that you've identified with your
Mhm.
work, your EHS processes or, whatever task it is that is just, I think, taking a lot of time at least.
Yeah.
And then, the A of that acronym would be align your expectations. So, this is not going to replace the complete process. You're still going to be involved. It's not going to automate it all. There still has to be some oversight. And then, you know, the S would be for starting small, for with quick wins. So, like I think a good example would be, getting some of the data on, your past injuries
Mhm.
the last year or something, and maybe anonymizing that and then adding it or uploading it to a generative AI large language model and seeing where the trends are. Um, if it doesn't really do anything else, it's really, I think, going to provide you like with some quick insights on where your most common injuries are and what the most common causes are.
Mhm.
I think those are quick wins that can really, demonstrate the value of these AI large language model applications. And then I think the final part is just like evolve. So, as you go through the process, just, you know, verify that it's giving you the output that you want, that it's technically accurate, and that it has the right context
Mhm.
for your given situation. So I guess, if I was going to kind of just summarize it, it's kind of again like start with those pain points,
Mhm.
start small, something with a quick win that can kind of demonstrate the value of these AI systems. Um, and I think after you kind of start seeing that value, you'll start to trust it more. You'll start to see where this could really help you.
Mhm.
Uh, so I think maybe following that approach would be best. Um, I just think that the frontline professionals have to really see it for themselves before they're going to understand how much value it's going to bring for you.
Mhm.
Uh, and really, again, experiment, use it on tasks that you're an expert in, and see how it's going to, save you time, uh, maybe help you think about certain things, or bring up certain hazards or controls that you may not have even thought of for
Yeah.
this certain task. I think it helps you think of the it helps you understand maybe the problem a bit better and how to solve it in maybe more creative ways than that you've
Definitely. And
thought
also,
about.
like, I've seen, like, it helps you with, like, I mean, not start from a blank page. Like, gives you some, like, a point to start off, and like makes it so much easier. I don't know if, like, back in college, like, sometimes, like, when you want to write an essay or something, like, just starting to, like, trying to put in outlines, try to start writing something, that takes a lot of effort. Just, I mean, writing it. So having this, I guess, gives you, like, like an entry or like start point, then you can do whatever, like, which is like great. I wish we had this like back when I was in college.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, that
Uh,
made it so much easier.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Probably would have graduated a year earlier.
Yeah, probably. Um, so yeah, like, do you guys see like that organization need like some sort of minimum to start playing around with AI, or like is it like they could start like small then scale, like, or is there like some prerequisite?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just speak from kind of the data piece and maybe Dan can talk more about the processes, which he
Uh-huh.
kind of already has. But AI can work with all types of data, and more data is better than none. Structured or unstructured. Um, the key is like just making sure it's meaningful. But I think before introducing that, at a bare minimum, they need to like establish consistent processes, whether that's the program that your EHS, you know, group is running on, program as in like a literal management system.
Yeah.
If everyone's not following the same policy, the AI won't be able to be tailored to your company, right? You could feed it OSHA regulations all day, but if it's not specific to your organization, it's not going to be useful.
Yeah.
So I think making sure from a systems piece and just from a management systems piece that you have that foundation set, then that I typically, when we're digitizing processes, that's kind of the first thing I ask for is like, well, what are you doing today? What does your program say you're supposed to be doing? And then let's set up the system to match that. And over time, the data that's being captured fulfills the requirements of the program and also obviously leverages the data that you need to like reduce risk. But if the data is missing key details or it's like inconsistently recorded for years upon years, like the AI-driven insights aren't going to be useful.
Hmm.
And so I think it's that. I think it's understanding your problem statement, like be clear on what you really want AI to accomplish. If you're using it for predictive analytics, like your historical data is going to have to accurately reflect.
Yeah.
Can't predict if you can't look back. If it's for automations, your workflows have to be defined. If you want it to
Mhm.
do XYZ, you got to know what XYZ are. I think the biggest mistake teams make is like assuming AI is going to fix everything and it won't. It's going to
Mhm.
learn from what it's given and just reinforce those existing patterns. So, Dan said it a few times, but seriously, like find one specific use case, refine the data and review the data feeding it into it, and then build from there. I have to imagine you have KPIs, you have targets you have to meet. We're already a few months into the year. Those are probably already defined from this year. If one of those is hazard reporting closure rates, like what's that process look like?
Mhm.
How are we meeting our target? Are we not? If we're not, is it due to the administrative burden? Like really kind of refine that problem. And then you can, go use guides like Dan has set up on his website to start small. And then you can start talking to vendors, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of that is people don't really know what their problem is. They just
Mhm.
want to start using AI and
Yeah.
and then they're floundering with the overwhelm.
Mhm. So yeah, like so then like where do you envision AI taking EHS over the next decade, especially in terms of predictive analytics and proactive risk management?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. I think it's probably almost impossible to predict for the next decade, but uh, I think I maybe would focus on like three um, you know, trends that I'm seeing right now. And the first one would be kind of using like the lagging indicators,
Hmm.
a shift from using those to like real-time risk awareness. Like I think Ariana talked about it with the computer vision models and getting like, real-time information that you can act on right now, as opposed to understanding like what has happened in the past. So I'm really excited about just shifting from a more like kind of reactive sort
Hmm.
of mentality to like a predictive, preventative mentality as an EHS professional. And it's kind of like it's probably a bad example, but like Minority Report,
Hmm.
that movie where they're like
Yeah.
predicting like someone like committing a crime, but it's kind of like similar where, we could predict with these certain factors if we have all the data available with
Hmm.
AI that, hey, we got a new person in this new process uh, that's like night shift. Those are all factors that are going to really increase our risk of injury. And like we
Yeah.
should, focus our efforts on something like that to
Hmm.
prevent any injuries. So I like I see that maybe coming where we can predict things predict hazards, and that's probably already here in some ways. Then like personalized safety approaches for individual workers. So I think generative AI may do this really well, is come up with a training program for your specific situation.
Yeah.
Maybe you are industry veteran, and maybe you need more information for like using this chill press,
Mhm.
maybe more a nuanced kind of information. But maybe you're a new machinist in a machine shop. What are like the basics that you need to know to stay
Mhm.
safe? I see that possibly happening, just a personalized kind of training to each person's you know background, experience, and
Mhm.
familiarity. And then integrating a lot of the risk management together, consolidating all, I think Ariana talked about it earlier, but breaking down those traditional silos
Mhm.
that we have with maybe like environmental compliance over
Yeah.
here, EHS, traditional EHS tasks on the other side. If we are able to integrate all that information and data together, I think we can really look at a hazard
Mhm.
um, or our EHS programs like more comprehensively,
Yeah.
so that people can get the full picture when they're
Mhm.
making decisions. So I think those are three trends I'm seeing that maybe will happen in the next decade. Not sure. Also, but most exciting, I think it's really the democratization of safety
Mhm.
awareness or safety expertise. I think, someone who is maybe just a frontline worker that doesn't have any EHS experience, they could also use some of these tools to just understand like what the hazards
Yeah.
are. I mean, I think they need to understand like what the limitations of them are as
Mhm.
well. But I think it's gonna help provide better education for everyone, not just safety professionals.
Yeah. And what about you, Ariana? What do you see like as a trends in AI that like must be like crucial for EHS over the next years?
Really a lot of the stuff that Dan mentioned, mine were, moving from reactive to proactive, the
Mhm.
real-time monitoring, moving beyond lagging indicators in a very real way, and the automation piece, right? What can we automate to streamline things? I think, agentic AI is going to be a huge one if we can get it right.
Yeah.
But what's the the double time of things, what we think what takes 3 months to advance is going to end up taking a month and a half. And so I can't even imagine where those agents are going to be, a year from now. I think computer vision is going to be very useful. From a virtual twin, the digital
Mhm.
twin
Yeah.
auditing perspective. Not just, is someone wearing their PPE, but like,
Mhm.
can I do an audit? Which I know that that technology has existed, but I think AI
Mhm.
can just really enhance it. As
Yeah.
I have one person that's in charge of 40 different facilities, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Can they have their, site manager go walk around with a camera? And not only is it like recording, but is it actually just taking down audit findings in real time? Like those are the
Yeah.
things I think will make the day-to-day, impact. Sensors for industrial hygiene, I think, to improve like exposure assessments, help predict the risk, but also like create a, a sampling plan for
Mhm.
you. Just anything where that you're spending hours and hours, and the more technical and calculated it is, the more apt it is for AI, right? You can train a model to do calculations, right?
True. Yeah.
I know I was listening to a webinar the other day where they were like, if you can calculate it, you don't need AI. And I kind of disagree, because I think just because you can calculate it in a fancy Excel sheet that's been working for 20 years doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it.
Yeah. And
So personally, I think that those could be benefits because it's just where
mhm.
people are wasting time that they could be, being more effective in other places. So
Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned like if you can calculate it, you don't need AI. But so for example, there are sometimes a lot of models like just to come up with the right like parameters for that model. Like me, like as like an engineer or something, I would waste a lot of time trying and error to find those parameters for that model.
Right.
However, using the machine learning or deep learning now, like I could sort like sift through huge amount of data, uh, get those like hard to find like parameters and connections between the data, come up with new like features from my data set. So I mean, it gives you a lot more capabilities than traditional
Yes.
like ways, and like
Right.
yeah. So I think it's a uh completely different tool set. I mean, traditional calculations are still valid, but it's a new thing that allows you to play around with a lot of scenarios that you could use to like come up with different outcomes.
Right. And
I
10
think another
times
thing,
10 times the speed, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, pretty much. And another thing, also I think having data from also like predictive maintenance with the EHS could give us a bigger picture of the risk that we have in the facilities,
mhm.
because some like a lot of times a risk starts from a malfunctioning equipment. For example, I come from an oil and gas background. Like if you have a puncture, like a storage tank or something, that will cause your EHS risk because that equipment has not been inspected properly, or there is
Right.
some parameter like process parameters that are not good, not monitored well, so like that corrosion build up, etc. So
Yeah,
combining
process
those
safety.
two, I think will bring a lot of value and bring I would say a holistic approach to the safety in our plants. All right, so I guess we're in the closing remarks here. So, Ariana, so what are your advice to leaders who feel overwhelmed by the digital transformation buzzwords and need to take a step to modernize their EHS data management?
Yeah, so I would say start small, focus on a specific problem. AI is overwhelming. There's buzzwords, snake oil, promises. Don't try to overhaul everything at once.
Yeah,
Instead of trying to implement AI, think about that one problem you face every day that annoys you. And that could be streamlining incidents, identifying trends, time spent on going through compliance documentation. Like only you know what your problem is. And see how AI can assist, right? Start small practical applications will help build the confidence and momentum and make the AI adoption easier over time. Don't get caught up in the idea that it has to be perfect from day one. It's a tool that you can leverage. And it's important, I think, to stay curious, ask questions, and remember that you once you have a clear picture of your data landscape, start small and digitize where you can, and then start just slowly build momentum based off of there. And most importantly, involve the people.
yeah,
don't
that's very
don't
true.
work in a silo. If you have an enthusiastic EHS leader like Dan, it make he's the enthusiastic one, but I know he still has to get buy-in from other
Yeah,
peers, right? So he's not doing things in a silo because you could
yeah,
you can perfect it and work on it. And if that's the first time that they hear about it, they're gonna look at you like you have six eyes, right?
yeah,
Involve the people early, right? If
yeah,
I
pretty
get a
much.
demo of a tool and in my technical experience, I think it could be really useful before I ever go back to that vendor, I need to get on the call with the people that are going to use this tool at the end of the day and bring them into the conversation very, very early before I try to get budget or approvals. Because they might not even be interested, or I need to sell them on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because they're eventually going to have to sell their operations team on it.
Mhm.
So, modernizing like your EHS data management is making smarter more proactive decisions, but you need to start with the end in mind and don't forget the people and the human in it.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like, any final thoughts on it, like how it just can strike the right balance between like human judgment and AI-driven insights in their day-to-day roles?
Yeah, I think AI and human judgment are complementary strengths, not like competing alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I kind of think of it as, or a good analogy is like a doctor using like an X-ray
Yeah.
machine. The tool provides information, but the professional provides the interpretation
Yeah.
of that. Um, and I think if we're using it to like do a first draft, we should review that critically afterwards,
Mhm.
enhance it with our like professional judgment, our expertise, and then apply it to improve the safety outcomes. So we're not again like replacing safety professionals. We're just kind of freeing them from any administrative burden.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think, you know, the AI tool is really to apply your expertise in a more effective and efficient way. The professional is really the key behind using the AI system. They provide the oversight. They kind of make the final decision. Um, and so I think I would leave it with that. The future belongs to those who know when to use AI and when to
Yeah.
rely on judgment. And I think, like, again, kind of going back to what Ariana said too, start small, but maybe start now, because I think these are going to be integrated into a lot of the systems that you are going to be using, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and, you know, I think you start experimenting on with
Yeah.
tasks that you're an expert on
Mm-hmm.
and see how it can provide real value.
Yeah, I've heard this quote like float around like I mean AI is not like gonna replace people, but it's gonna I mean people who
Replace
use AI
people.
are going to be
Yeah.
using like replacing the other people who don't. So I
Mhm.
guess like we need to start like people are need to start using it now, like tiptoe, like try to I mean play around with it and then because it's getting I think in a lot of the tools that we're using, like day to day, even like Word and Excel now, the newest version, they have Copilot embedded. So it's
Yeah.
it's it's
Yeah.
getting implemented everywhere. So we need to get used to it. Well, it was a very thoughtful discussion that we had. Thank you guys for making the time, and I mean, I really had a great time talking to you, and I hope our listeners will have to. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for having us. I'm Arianna Howard on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to chat about this, and yeah, happy to or join the EHS tech community on LinkedIn as well. It's growing slowly but surely. But the more enthusiasts we have in there, the better. Sharing
Definitely,
information, doesn't cost anything, and it's good to not feel alone. So thanks so much for having us, and
of course.
allowing us to share our insights.
Yeah, thanks, Iskander. And Ariane and I also have Substacks that we're going to be collaborating on soon in
Mhm.
the next few weeks. So maybe just keep an eye out for those collaborative articles that we're gonna send out soon. Uh, and I also am on LinkedIn, Dan Grinnell, also the person behind the AI for EHS. If you haven't figured that out yet, I guess. But really great to talk with you, Iskander, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, always nice to talk with like-minded people. Thank you guys.
Thank
Right,
you. Bye.
let me stop the recording.